Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Greetings from my final day in Wyoming for a while, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, I'm headed home to be with my bride and my puppy. This has been a 6-week long work trip, and I'm more than excited to get home. But once I arrive, it will be another whirlwind of activity. From home improvement projects, a candidate meet and greet with Monty Fritz. Trust me, there's going to be more about Monty Fritz here in the coming months, but we're going to be meeting with Monty Fritz. There's a Brandon Lake concert in Knoxville, and then it's a return trip to Greece to walk in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul again. For this week's episode, I have another interview for you. If you're new here, lean in close, because every week we rip the veil of lies that are spoon-fed to us by the political elite, expose the erosion of our God-given liberties, and spotlight the principled leadership we need to fight back and restore what the swamp in Nashville and DC is hell-bent on destroying. Folks, our constitutional republic is under siege. The new aristocracy, those career politicians and the deep state bureaucrats and special interest cronies, they are suffocating our freedoms one backroom deal at a time. They've turned public service into a gravy train, ignoring the will of the people while padding their pockets and expanding government tyranny. But today, we're shining a light on a true freedom fighter who's saying enough to this nonsense right here in Tennessee. My guest for this episode is Will Bolton, the anti-establishment challenger taking on the entrenched incumbent in District 23's GOP primary. Will isn't just talking the talk. He's lived a life of service that's forged him into the kind of leader we desperately need to drain the Nashville swamp. Let me tell you about Will Bolton, because his story is a blueprint for what real American grit looks like. Born and raised with the values that built this nation, faith, family, and hard work, Will answered the call to serve early on. He enlisted in the United States Navy, where he honed his discipline and commitment to defending our liberties. But that was just the beginning. Will went on to join the Tennessee Air National Guard, standing ready to protect our state and nation from threats both foreign and domestic. As a military veteran myself, I can tell you that kind of service just doesn't build character. It steels your soul against the lies and betrayals we see in politics today. After his time in uniform, Will didn't rest on his laurels. He dove headfirst into federal law enforcement, starting his career with the elite United States Secret Service, witnessing firsthand the inner workings of power and the corruption that festers when unchecked. From there, he rose to the ranks as a senior special agent with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security. For more than 2 decades, Will was on the front lines, busting criminals, securing our borders, and exposing the fraud that's turning our country into a magnet for chaos. He's seen the waste, the abuse, and the outright lies that let illegal immigration erode our sovereignty and burden hardworking Tennesseans. But Will's service didn't stop at the federal level. Back home in McMinn County, he's currently serving as a constable, keeping our community safe and upholding the law with integrity. And get this, he's also stepped up as a substitute teacher, molding the next generation in their early education. Why? Well, because Will knows that true leadership starts at the grassroots, teaching our kids about real American values before the radical agendas in education can poison their minds. As a family man, deeply rooted in faith and committed to his loved ones, Will understands that the fight for liberty isn't abstract. It's about protecting our homes, our children, and our way of life from government overreach. Now, why is Will Bolton throwing his hat in the ring for Tennessee House District 23? Well, it's because he's sick and tired of the good old boys club that's in Nashville selling out East Tennessee. The incumbent, Representative Mark Cochran, well, apparently he's just been a yes man to Governor Bill Lee's big government schemes, pushing wasteful vouchers that starve rural schools, adding sneaky exceptions to pro-life laws that betray the unborn, and rubber stamping budgets bloated with corporate welfare and stadium deals that bleed taxpayers dry. Well, Will's had enough of these lies masquerading as conservatism. As a true constitutional conservative, he's pledging self term limits, regular town halls to hear directly from the people he is elected to represent, and a no compromise stance on securing our borders, defending the Second Amendment without restrictions, and slashing the fraud that's exploded our state budget from $38 billion to $60 billion under the establishment's rule. Will is not backed by out of state PACs or deep pocket donors like we just saw in the District 7 congressional race. He's powered by patriots like us who demand accountability. He's drawing on his ICE experience to deny perks to illegals, his military background to support defend the guard and keep our troops out of endless wars, and his substitute teaching insights to fix public schools without unaccountable cash grabs. And let's not forget this nod to McMinn County's own history, the 1946 Battle of Athens, where veterans rose up against corrupt officials. That's the spirit Will embodies: righteous anger against tyranny, fearless leadership for liberty. So, in this episode, we're diving deep with Will on how he's exposing the lies in Nashville, championing principled leadership, and fighting to reclaim our liberties. We're going to tackle the hypocrisy on abortion, the scam of school vouchers, the invasion at our borders, and more. If you're disillusioned with the political class, much like me, this should serve as your battle cry. So stay tuned, Patriots. Will Bolton is here to show us how to crush the establishment and to restore Tennessee to its constitutional roots. So grab your coffee, turn up the volume, and let's get into it. Liberty, leadership, and lies, because the truth will set us free.
Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have a candidate for the General Assembly. He's actually going to be competing in the GOP primary next year for Tennessee House District, was it 32?
23.
23. Sorry, yeah. A little bit of dyslexic. His name is Will Bolton, and he decided to come on the program and answer a few questions so we can educate Tennesseans about what he stands for and where he wants to take his candidacy and what he would do once he was elected to the General Assembly. So welcome, Will. If you can give us a little background about yourself, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure. Excuse me. Thanks for having me on. I apologize I've been speaking so much lately. My throat's gravelly, so I apologize. I appreciate your invitation to come on. So I grew up in a little town in Mississippi. It was little back then. It's grown a little bit now, with Memphis being as bad as it's gotten. So about 20 minutes south of Memphis, a little town called Hernando. And my grandmother raised me and my sisters. We moved in with her when we were 7, and she was a single grandmother at the time. My papa actually left her because she took the kids in. He didn't want to raise another set of kids. He was an interesting guy too. He was also Navy, but he lied about his age, joined the Navy at 15, and he was World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. That was his vintage. So as you can imagine, he was an interesting guy to talk to. So, but yeah, she raised me, and she was a product of the Depression era Mississippi. And so she pushed hard work, service before self, and conservative values on us. I can remember I ended up getting a job when I was 13, working in a factory, loading boxes. And it was just, we didn't have a lot. So I didn't come from a life of privilege. I kind of came from working hard and, making your own way. And so that's kind of what stuck with me. So I joined the Navy out of high school and went to went to Virginia for 3 years. Moved when I got out. They did a reduction in force under Clinton, and so I just decided to take it. So I moved back to Mississippi, went in the Tennessee Guard, and was also a deputy sheriff. And I was finishing my degree at night. And then Al Gore would fly into our base a lot, and so we would take care of security. I was security police, so we would take care of security. And I got introduced to the Secret Service office out of Memphis. And so one day I was talking to our chief master sergeant, and I said, "Hey, that looks like a pretty interesting job." And he said, "Oh, you interested in that?" And I said, "No, it looks interesting. I'd like to know some more about it." And so the next thing I know, I had these guys in sunglasses all around me. You want to get a job? So I put an application in, and it took about 2 years. They vet you pretty well, and got hired by the Secret Service and sitting down in Miami, Florida to work on that field office. And you start off working for you either work bank fraud or counterfeit or something like that. So I started in bank fraud, and then went over to counterfeit for about a year. And then I went over to a joint terrorism task force, which was very interesting at the FBI. Was the Al Qaeda group. And so we would investigate allegations and information and whatnot as far as that went. And then I left the service, went over to ICE. I was in a drug task force, so we would do drug money laundering, and then also immigration stuff as it came out. Believe it or not, we were doing immigration raids, 15, 16 years ago. Also, even under Democrat presidents, we still did immigration raids. So then I got recruited into internal affairs after that, and worked the last half of my career in that. And it's funny when the agent in charge was talking to me about it, I was like, IA, for a cop, IA is kind of, so I kind of thought about it. And then, I was telling my wife, I said, integrity is a big thing to me. Right. And especially when you're in a public trust position, when you got a badge and a gun and you can change somebody's future, you need to have the utmost integrity. And so I decided to go over there and kind of worked in that, ended up going up to DC to headquarters. And then I got recruited into the Inspector General's office. And so the IG kind of covers the entire department. So I was in a special investigations unit, and we would investigate agency heads and political appointees, counterintelligence, you name it, we would do it, whatever was special. And then my last couple of years, I was a national security person, just kind of, vetting that kind of stuff. And one thing you would do is, it's waste, fraud, abuse, misconduct, that was like the tenets. And so it's interesting. I always tell people I got more conservative in internal affairs, especially when I was in the SIU and dealing with politicals, to where I'm like, that's not right. Oh, that's not, what's going on here. And so it kind of shaped a little bit more. I was already conservative, but then I kind of shaped me a little bit, pushed me a little further to the right, I guess, conservative wise. And so I retired about 4 years ago. And somewhere in all the years, my wife's parents, we were all from around Memphis. They'd moved to Cookeville. And so my two older daughters graduated, one college, one high school, but they went to Cookeville, met their husbands, and moved to Cleveland, Tennessee, and started having babies. And so my wife said, when I was getting ready to retire, my wife's like, no more than 30 minutes from the grandkids. That's my line. So I kind of happened to run across this house here in McMinn County, in this land. And so I said, what do you think about this? And so, here we are. But I substitute teach part-time, and then I work at a little private school, and then I teach at our kids' co-op. But I'm one of those guys that, I'm that Gen X where I just want to be left alone. And then I realized you can't be left alone, right? I mean, if you're like Gary Humble had a good 2 minutes when he spoke at one of the GOP dinners recently. And he said, what's the General Assembly up to when we're not watching? And so somebody asked me about 8 months ago, would you consider running? What would you think? And I was kind of like, let me pray about it. Let me think about it. Let me think about it. Because again, I'm that generation. Just leave me alone. But then I kind of watched votes, and I realized there's no way that can happen. There's no way. There's been a slow creep of kind of, I think it's progressivism, but it's also, you got the establishment to where they've got people. It's like a Jedi mind trick that's pulled. We're a conservative state. We're not really. If you look at it, it's like we were talking about a minute ago with Hughes versus Lee. We're a constitutional carry state. Well, not really, but yeah, now we're closer. But our conservative legislature and governor and all, they're backing an appeal using our tax money to take away gun rights, and it's that's the kind of stuff that kind of drove me to be like, you know what, I need to jump in and at least give it a go. So
Absolutely. Well, yeah, like you mentioned, you alluded to earlier, we talked a lot, ladies and gentlemen. We talked a lot before we started recording the episode, and I agree with you there that Tennessee is not conservative. That it's a Jedi mind trick. I mean, people think that, hey, Tennessee's red. I'm going to say Tennessee's definitely not red. We're definitely not blue either. But what we are is green. Most of our General Assembly will chase the money in order to rob us of our liberty. And they don't care. They'll slap an R next to their name because they know they can't get elected any other way in the state. But
right.
they should all have not the green as in the Green Party, but they should have a dollar sign in their parentheses for whatever political party they were supposed to represent, because that's what they're doing, is representing out of state money and out of state interests.
Mm-hmm. I would encourage people to go to follow the money. I think it's .org.
Yeah.
And look your legislator up, look
Yep.
your senator up, and see who they're money from.
And the Tennessee, because as a prior candidate myself, I know that you can track each individual member running for office in Tennessee. You could track their political campaign donations, and if once you do, I think most Tennesseans would be surprised how much out of state money funds these candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, as a fellow Navy veteran, how has your military service and experience as a federal agent as well shaped your commitment to constitutional conservatism and protecting individual liberties here in Tennessee?
So I swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Like we talked about, I went in delayed entry at 17, and I swore an oath then, and that's always something I've taken very seriously. And being a deputy sheriff in rural Mississippi, I saw some things every now and again that kind of make you shake your head. I arrested a chief deputy from another county one time, and he definitely encouraged me not to arrest him, and I think that's a nice way of saying it. But I kept seeing that, and integrity is a big thing to me. And so when I went into internal affairs, that kind of, like I said, I grew up conservative with the grandmother, but watching some of these folks, for lack of a more nuanced word, I'll say, get away with stuff. It makes you scratch your head, and it's like, wait a minute. And so I'm kind of a history nerd too, and so I read and research, and I read Ron Paul's The Revolution, and I kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I read Barry Goldwater, Conscious of a Conservative, and then I read his papers and writings, and then obviously Reagan, and it just kind of shaped me to be like, well, wait a minute, the Constitution actually says this, and that's what we're supposed to be going by. We're supposed to be going by, we have the right to keep and bear arms, boom, and that's full stop, right? I mean, there's no nuance, there's nothing like that. We have a right to freedom of religion, freedom of the press. We have all these different rights, freedom of speech, and again, there's all these nuances and all this where just go by what's written. It's kind of like, I think we were talking about it earlier. I'm a Christian, and I believe that the Bible is the inerrant and inspired word of God. And I always scratch my head when somebody says, "Well, no, I know I'm a Christian and the Bible, except for this piece." It's the same thing with the Constitution. There's no except for this piece. The founders gave a mechanism if you don't like something, and it's amending the Constitution. That was the mechanism. It's kind of like, war powers. Are you familiar with Defend the Guard?
Yes.
It's kind of like that, right? I mean, what's the harm in having Congress perform their duty under the Constitution before we activate units and send them to foreign combat zones? And it's just interesting. Like if all these different agencies would follow kind of what they're outlined in the Constitution, what they're to do, we would be just a different world. I mean, it's amazing to me. And it's like I was telling you earlier, I'm a Goldwater Reagan kind of conservative. I mean, I believe the Constitution is written. That takes care of all your freedoms right there. I believe a small government with limited functions. I mean, as somebody who was around during the creation of DHS, I mean, I can tell you that is a behemoth. And being in the IG's office where you have oversight over it. I mean, it's bad when you get an allegation and you have to ask somebody, wait, what office is that? Where's that at? What? And so, sorry about that. And so, small government's definitely the way to go. I mean, there's an old article Tom Ridge wrote 1,000 years ago about DHS, and just it kind of outlined the unnecessariness of it. And so, but Uncle Sam never misses an opportunity to grow, right? So that's my take of small government, limited functions. Taxes. Taxes are they are what they are, but I think we only need to take in enough to fund a small government with limited functions. And then we talked earlier too, personal responsibility. I think I think I was saying, like, my youngest daughter, we put her in private school this year. I didn't put in for a voucher. That's my choice to put her in private school. So we're paying for the private school. Vouchers have never crossed my mind because, again, it's my choice to do it. So I think that's a big thing too. I think if we could get back to personal responsibility and people just managing themselves better, we'd be in a better spot. And one thing I noticed, like I said, this voucher thing, I spoke for like 2 minutes at Monroe County GOP dinner the other night, and the last thing I said is it's not conservative to grow the size and scope of government, and that's it. If you're a conservative and you think that's okay, I would argue that you don't know what the word means. Between that and you figure, spending taxpayer dollars to fight, to obstruct gun rights, you got all these different things that our legislature is just failing on, honestly. And I think with my experience, if you look at Mark Cochran's resume, you can Google his name and pull his LinkedIn up. His life is designed to be a politician, right? I mean, he was a staffer for Bob Corker and different people in campaigns. And then he's working for the county mayor's office as the assistant to the county mayor, who, by the way, is his first cousin, in a job. And so, but you can look there. And if you look at my resume, you'll see military veteran, law enforcement, federal agent. I teach, I volunteer in church. Like I said, my grandmother instilled in me the mentality of service. And so that value carries with me, where that's, I had somebody ask me one day, like, why are you running? Are you just, are you bored? And I said, no. I said, I'm one of these people, I want to be left alone. But when I see a need that somebody needs to step in and do, I try to do that. I try to make the most of my experience and what I know, and just to go in there and try to better things. And so that's just in a nutshell. That's me. I know it was a lot of chatting, but.
Well, wonderful. And that's going to lead us into our first break here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Mr. Will Bolton, candidate for the GOP nomination over there in Tennessee House District 23. And we're going to pick up a little bit. He alluded to Representative Cochran in our last segment, and we're going to talk about Representative Cochran's support for the school vouchers? I know, Will, you oppose them as not only unconstitutional and wasteful, but how does this stance align with preserving liberty in education and ensuring accountability, personal accountability, and public spending?
It doesn't. um, you can look at um, several organizations have asked for information about the voucher program, and the state's kind of like, they've done the curly shuffle and whatever to try to not give the information. And it's because there's no accountability. There's no transparency. There's none of that. I mean, the first 10,000, I think, were first come, first served. $75 million, I mean, or 73 million, excuse me. It boggles the mind. I mean, there's, like we were talking, what is it? 80% of people who took vouchers actually had their kids in private school before and they could afford it. But there's no, and I don't know that you can fault them because there's nothing prohibiting it. But it's interesting because you've got this wide open door. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you're aware of this. I don't know how aware your viewers are, but low income for a family of four is 174,900. I mean, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's mind blowing. So I don't know. The driving force obviously was the PAC money, we talked about earlier, but I think the driving force in that was that. And for whatever reason, the governor just had to get this done. And what you've got is you've got a piece of crap. I mean, for a bill that, it's got government clause in private schools now. Mark White, a representative in Memphis, has taken over this committee, and he's going to encourage private schools to take part in national testing. So what leverage does the voucher money play in that? I mean, I'm going to assume it's probably going to play quite a bit. If you want to stay an approved school next year, you're going to submit to this testing, or, well, we noticed the curriculum you use is, very heavily Christian, got a Christian worldview. We don't really like that. So we're going to need you to pull it out. It's a slow creep. And then, you look at too, and this was something they were warned about also. It just came out in the last couple of days. Voucher money is paying for these Islamic schools that are teaching Sharia law being above the Constitution. I mean, so there's so many negatives to this bill that it blows the mind, what their rush was to pass it. And I think, again, it's, Bill Lee is term limited. I think he realizes, he realizes he's going to be a lame duck more and more. And I think that he wanted some kind of a win. But I mean, our legislature, and that's, the Senate and the House, they did a terrible job watching out for their constituents.
Absolutely. I think it was Bill Lee. I mean, part of it was Bill Lee trying to purchase a legacy, which is, most politicians do want a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is Bill Lee purchased it with our tax dollars.
Right.
It's completely unconstitutional because our Constitution states that the General Assembly shall provide for a means of free public education. There's nothing in the Constitution that grants them the authority to spend money to subsidize private education. Yet they all did it. I mean, well, not all of them. There are a few principled individuals that stood against it, conservative members of the House and the Senate. But I mean, they stood against it and on the constitutional means. And those people are the ones we should applaud and support. And they actually took their oath seriously. But anyway, so let's we'll go on again since you're going to be taking on Mr. Cochran in the primary. What are your thoughts on the hypocrisy in leadership when incumbents like your future opponent vote for bills that add exceptions to abortion laws? I mean, weakening our pro-life protections that were already in place. We had the Human Life Protection Act in Tennessee was some of the best pro-life protection in the country. I mean, people call it the trigger law, but once Roe v. Wade or the Dobbs decision was handed down, I mean, that kicked the Human Life Protection Act into place. And What do you think about people that run as conservatives, conservative Christians, that are actually weakening the pro-life protections that we had in place?
I think it's very disingenuous. McMinn here, we literally in Athens, we literally have a church on every corner. For somebody to do that and to, you sit in church with your parents and whatever. I'm a conservative Christian. I've seen him post somewhere he's a teetotaler. He's this uber righteousness, but then you look at it like, wait a minute, House Bill 990 that you voted for weakens those laws. But it's interesting. In my past life too, I investigated drug money laundering. And so I know how to follow the money. And so when I would see a vote, I'd follow the money. And he takes quite a bit of money from different political action committees, medical and education and whatnot. And I'm sure that influences the vote a lot. Unfortunately, Senator Blackburn, she gave him $10,000 about a month ago, and she's endorsed him. So he's got all this outside influence pressuring him, and unfortunately, I talked about his resume a little while ago. There's nothing in there that has required him to have a backbone and stand up, and so I think that's probably it too. When you're focused on, I want to be a politician, I gotta move up, you're going to do as you're told. I've met a couple of reps kind of at different events, and I was told, matter of factly, his reputation up there, he does whatever the governor and the speaker want him to do. That's what he does. And so I'll tell you about me, just differentiating between us. I'm not afraid to stand up and say no. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was up in DC, a friend of mine, we're actually good friends today. He actually wrote me a letter of reference for this, so I'll post it one of these days. But we had dinner one night, and he said, Billy, you know why when I retired, I was a GS-14 step 8, and I put in for a couple of 15s and didn't get them. And he said, you know why you're plateauing off promotion wise? And I said, no, I have no idea. I said, I've been here, I've been in the government 20 years and this, that, and the other, and I've got experience. And he said, and I'll clean this up for the podcast, but he said, you won't, he was an old Navy chief too. He said, it's because you won't suck up to them. He said, when they tell you they want something done, you talk about the Constitution, or you talk about policy, or you talk about the law, you talk about that kind of stuff. He said, they don't want that. They want you just to say, okay, and make it happen. And I said, I can't do that. That's not how I'm wired. The right is right. You follow the law, you follow the Constitution. Right is right. And he said, if you'll just forego that, he's like, you'll be an SES in a few years if you want to. And I said, I just can't do it, I remember being out of CONUS doing an interview one time, and I had a boss call me and tell me to do something that would have been a violation of the person's right. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. It's against this. We can't do that. And so needless to say, he wasn't a fan of mine, but the point in that is I'm not afraid to stand up and say no, because, courage is contagious, like Billy Graham used to say. Mm. And that's what it is, right? You've got this handful and you can sit there and look at this letter that went to the AG, that handful of reps right there. That's your courageous representatives. That's people who take their oath seriously. And that's the thing, like I was saying, when you're in a position of public trust, you have to be better than you might be, right? I mean, so I don't think highly of that kind of stuff. I think you need to have, there needs to be courage in politics. You can't just, well, I want to be the speaker someday and, go do whatever you feel like, you want to do. And hopefully people will see that during this campaign. It's like I spoke somewhere the other day and I said, as we progress, the differences will become more and more pronounced. I mean, I won't attack him personally. I have no desire to do that, but his background, his experience, and his voting record are fair game.
Absolutely. And like you said, we were talking earlier before the started the recording for the show. Him and Will and I have both some similar backgrounds. We're both in the Navy, both did some of the same jobs in the Navy. We actually were actually stationed at the same command, not at the same time. And there's a common theme among former sailors, I think, and that's we definitely have the ability to tell the emperor he's not wearing any clothes. So having that courage to do that, I mean, sometimes it will limit your career progression, but having integrity, being the person you are who you are when nobody's looking, that's what we need in elected office here, I believe. And I applaud you for the being not afraid to tell the emperor he hasn't any clothes on. So let's get into the next question. How would you tackle wasteful government spending, such as, we talked about this before, the corporate welfare and stadium funding, which you've criticized, to reduce our budget bloat? Bill Lee's 10 for 10 that all 10 of them he's failed to deliver on his original campaign promises of shrinking the government. We've had a 56% growth in the Tennessee budget since he's been in office. How would you reduce our budget bloat and dependency on federal funds?
I think that one thing we got to do is we need an audit. We need a neutral audit, nonpartisan, to go through and honestly look and say, we can cut this, we can cut this, we can cut this. That's the first thing. And then just introducing legislation to slice some things. I mean, I can guarantee you, and this is just my previous experience, there is bloat. There are departments that are way bigger probably than they should be. There are departments that are receiving money that they don't need. You look at just a prime example. We increase funding for the highway patrol, and then you think about all these smaller departments and how they're dying for money. And so why not maybe not increase the highway patrol as much and divert those funds to smaller departments that we need, or even more urban areas. I mean, you look at, somebody asked me recently about, what do you think about the National Guard going to Memphis? And I said, I think it's a slippery slope. However, one thing to consider on that is that's a failure on Bill Lee and the Tennessee General Assembly for the last 8 years. They failed to solve the problem. They failed to send the resources. Why did they not send the National Guard in? Why did they not send more resources? Why did they not do these things? Because they have these pet projects, right? It's kind of like the vouchers were 146 million, I think is what they spent. Why not take that money, divide it up amongst the 95 counties and send it that way, right? Or, I was at a small rural volunteer fire department the other day, and they're dying for equipment. They're dying for, training, all these things. Why not, stack that up and push it to them rather than, because here's the thing, right? There's this myth of school choice, school choice, school choice. You have school choice. If the way it was marketed is, little Josh down in, a bad area of Hamilton County, if his mama wants to send him to, you can send your kid to a school in the next county without any, there's, if your kid's not doing well in one county, just send them to the next county. That's one thing we have in McMinn is Southern McMinn is like Calhoun and areas like that. And then right across the line into Bradley is Walker Valley High School. Guess what? A lot of kids go to Walker Valley because it's closer to them, and it's a good school. So this myth of we got to spend all this money to funnel them into private schools. And then, as we were talking earlier, statistically, there's been so much waste in this. It's insane. That's the things we just need to look at, like a budget surplus, if we have it. And again, this is just coming from my background, but one thing the federal government does, and you probably remember this from your military time. Hey, we've still got $5 million on the books, and the end of the FY is coming. We got to spend it all. What is something you need? Because we don't want to be short because they won't give us the same amount next year. Well, we need to have somebody go in and audit, and guess what? Not give you the same amount, reduce it, and make you work with less. I guarantee you, in the governor's office, in different agencies, there are departments that could go away. I guarantee you there are. There's no way. The government is like it's like a hungry beast, right? I mean, it's always wanting to feed and grow and whatever. There are things to look at. There are things we could cut. First and foremost, I mean, we talked about it, I think, beforehand, but I don't understand with the vouchers why they didn't try a more private sector approach with this. Again, personal responsibility, right? The government should be the last resort. So,
yeah, and one of the first things you could cut is probably the governor paying people with our tax dollars to lobby the General Assembly against our rights. And with that, we're going to take another break, and then we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to finish this segment up with just a couple of questions with Will. Now, Will, in leadership terms, how important is it? And we talked about this a little bit before we got on the air. And how important is it for representatives to poll constituents on key issues? And can you give us an example where Cochran's votes ignored the district's needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's primary. I mean, it's of a primary importance. The word representative is you represent, right? You don't represent Nashville. You represent District 23. You don't represent the governor. You represent, the people around here. And I think, I know for a fact there were dozens of people telling him, do not vote for that voucher bill. And he did it anyway. And so I've actually, I talk to people all the time, and I know a teacher, and we were talking about the vouchers because I was basically curious. I hadn't even decided to run then. I was kind of trying to just get an idea of what people were thinking. And I said, what's your thought on that? And they said, he cares more about moving up in the party than he does about people back here. And it's a shame. It's sad because, this is where he's from. But, again, we get to the founding fathers had an idea of a citizen legislator, right? You go, you serve, you go home, you're answerable to the people back home. And that's kind of the model that I want to have. And I've said this a couple of times, and I sometimes get, fussed at about it, but I'm not looking to be a career politician. I don't want to be the governor. I don't care about any of that. I'm looking to serve, and I'll term limit myself. I won't go more than say 4 times. And then I'm going to go home. I'm 52, right? I mean, I'm not looking to be 70, and I want to serve, 8 years, whatever, and then go back. And so I think that's primarily important, because once you get into that, I want to be a career politician. Well, you get the devil whispered in your ear, well, what about this? Money and money. And that's one thing I keep getting told is, you got to raise X amount. You got to raise X amount. I don't know. I mean, a few years ago, I was living in Virginia when I was in headquarters. I was living down in Fredericksburg, and you had a guy named Dave Bratt. And Dave Bratt was a professor at one of the colleges. He took on Eric Cantor, who was the speaker at the time. Well, Cantor had like millions in his war chest, and Dave Bratt had, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 maybe, and he won. And I think it's a matter of getting out and like talking to people and waking them up, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are trusting. He's a good hometown boy. He wouldn't do that. I mean, he wouldn't do that. I spoke at a Republican women's meeting a month or so ago, and I said, here's what the conservatism I live by. Boom, 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 boom. And then I said, is it conservative to grow the size and scope of government? Well, no. Okay, Mark did that with the vouchers. As a matter of fact, he kind of had a bunch of backdoor dealings. He's in leadership, and he pushed it. Wait a minute, what? And then, is it conservative to obstruct your gun rights? Well, no. Okay, so Hughes versus Lee, Mark has not said one word about it. He's kind of hiding on it right now. And silence is consent. That's one thing I keep saying. Silence is consent. And then I said, and thirdly, you've got House Bill 990. Is it conservative to be pro-choice or pro-life? Well, pro-life. Well, he voted for it. And then also, is it conservative to sponsor digital IDs? Look over in the UK right now. They're pushing back against those. He co-sponsored a bill for the digital IDs. And is that conservative? And then they're kind of, you can see this like, wait a minute, what? And then after they asked the person who set it up, did he really vote that way? Yeah. And one thing I tell people, don't take my word for it. Go to the legislature's page and look at his record. Go to followthemoney.org. Look at where they're getting money from. Don't take my word for it. The very best men are men at best. That's a saying that I love. And it's whether you're and it relates in a kind of a Christian standpoint, but you can also take it another way. People make mistakes, right? So that's it. I'm pretty sure about what I'm saying, but don't take my word for it. Go yourself and look, because an informed citizenry is a free citizenry, right? I mean, you look at a lot of the problems we have now. If people would just shake it off and inform themselves, they wouldn't be up to mischievous things behind our back when we're not paying attention. And most people, unfortunately, don't pay attention. So did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest obstacles that you're going to overcome is what you just described. When people just don't understand, or they don't know, they don't care. It's the apathy of the electorate that has kept these people in office for so long, and they keep getting reelected because people don't know the truth about who's funding them and how they vote and what bills they support and what bills they, our General Assembly is kind of unique in that in the subcommittees and the committees that there's not recorded votes. So they kill all the good, the conservative legislation at the behest of out-of-state money, but they'll pass some of the stuff that mostly robs us of our liberty. And most people just don't know, or they don't care, because like you said, the Gen Xers, hey, I just want to be left alone. Government doesn't leave any of us alone. There's not an aspect of our lives, from the electricity and the Wi-Fi we're using right now to the carpets we walk on, the sheets we sleep on, the mattresses we sleep on, the toothpaste we use. Government is involved in every aspect of our lives. And if we don't get involved, it's only going to get more.
Yep. That's one thing I can tell you, just from being retired federal government. I can tell you that Uncle Sam does not, he's never full. I mean, he's never satisfied. So
yep, absolutely. And his 50 greedy little nephews, they've learned a good lesson, even if they have an R or a D after their name, on how to. I use this phrase quite a lot, and it concerns the apathy of the voter. And I say there is nothing so well designed to rob the citizens of their sweat equity, meaning our money, and our liberty than the government we apathetically let get elected. There's nothing designed that good to do that.
Right. And you have very few, even in red states, right? You have very few people, again, it's that willful or otherwise ignorance, that understand the 10th Amendment.
Right.
You have a few governors who are like, no. I mean, when it suits them, years ago, Colorado legalized marijuana, and the federal government said, no, we're still enforcing it. And Colorado said, well, we're not going to help you. So it's that kind of stuff. That's one thing. People have to understand the slippery slopes we can get into, for all the good that, say, President Trump might do on certain actions he takes. What happens when a Democrat is back in office? I mean, so
the powers in the legislative body, that's who we should concern ourselves with the most.
Yeah. They should have, and as part of, a governor, a governor should have an expert in the 10th Amendment as an advisor, in some capacity when things come up with the federal government. I mean, there's so many things, like we we're talking about the defend the guard earlier. The governor has control of the guard. I mean, the law says without a declaration of war, So why are we sending these folks off to foreign combat zones to get killed and maimed and, otherwise wounded when there's not a declaration of war on some of this stuff? And so um, that's just, it's like I said, it's willful ignorance, whether it's willful or not. The 10th Amendment, that's our shield that the founders put into place. And, on the state level, I mean, you can look at some of these sheriffs, for example, they're constitutional authorities during COVID who said, I'm not enforcing a mandate. Sorry. What happened? Nothing.
Exactly.
So, there's a lot of things that need to be changed. You need to get a governor, but also get a legislature in place that's willing to stand up for those rights.
Absolutely. Because the state legislative body is the body of government in our constitutional republics that's designed to be the part of the government that stands in the gap between totalitarianism, tyranny, and the individual. Because the smallest minority on the planet is the individual. Mm-hmm. That's the way our system of government was set up to do. Is our legislative bodies are to protect the smallest minority, the individual. And when you get the people that are in power, like in the General Assembly right now, that are protecting the governor, not the people, you get what you get. Mm-hmm. So finally, Will, where can people find out more about you? Go ahead and plug your website, plug anything you do, and then we'll make sure we include your website in the podcast description and share that with everybody else. Tell everybody some final closing words and how they can get in touch with you.
Okay. Like I mentioned in the episode, I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe in it. It's as written, and it's kind of full stop there, right? Even to career detriment at times. I follow the Constitution and I follow the law. And so, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to be a career politician. So I have nothing, there's nothing you can really hold over my head as far as that goes. But I'm dedicated to our district. I want to bring experience. I want to bring integrity, and I want to bring district focus back. My kids live here. My grandkids live here. And I want to make sure that this area and this state is somewhere that's going to be worth them growing up in and growing old in. And I think we're in a precarious time, I think, to where if we don't push back, if we don't start pushing back, that kind of gives the establishment the green light to move forward. And I think a lot of it, like we talked about, it's apathy and it's willful ignorance and it's these different things to where we need to fight. And I'm not advocating anything like that. I'm just saying we need to, in the voting booth, we need to sponsor people. We need to donate to folks. There are good people running now. Monty Fritz is fantastic. People like that, people in the legislature, that's who we need to be pushing. And we need to ask our representatives, what are you doing? Talk to me about what you're doing, and don't take no for an answer. That's one thing with Mark Cochran is he doesn't think he has to answer anybody. So
you could be like my representative who has blocked me and other people on social media.
Right. One thing I'll pledge to do too is I'll set up a website, and every vote I make, you'll know my reasoning. You'll get exactly why I voted, what my thought process is, all of that. And also, I'll hold town halls. Mark doesn't bother to do that because I don't think he's worried about what the constituents think. But I'll hold town halls, depending on the schedule, obviously. But, I'd say no less than quarterly, I'll have a town hall. And I want to hear. I was out at a little meet and greet last weekend fielding questions. And that's the difference in taking pictures and taking action. And that's what it is. Mark takes pictures. He goes, he smiles and he does whatever. I talk to people because I care about what people think and what they want our home here to look like. You can find me, Will Bolton for State Representative is my Facebook page. And then Bolton for FORTN.com is my website. It's got more things on it about issues and whatnot. Like I said, I have decades of experience serving people. My resume is not tailored to any kind of a politician. I just, I may stick my foot in my mouth, but I'm just not. I'm not. I say that as I'm not tailored that way, I guess. And I believe that you stand up for what you believe in. And if we say we're a constitutional republic, we need to fight for that. And if we say that we're a red state, we need to make it so. Like you said, it's green slash purple. Green, whatever that color would make. Um, it's something that we have got to stand up for, because if not, we're going to wake up and it'll be gone. It'll be gone. I mean, you think about this digital ID thing that he co-sponsored. It's mind blowing to me. Like, how does that benefit the people in East Tennessee? So, but I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, Will. And I think Will's resume, if you guys go check out his website, will definitely show a loyalty to following an oath, not a loyalty to a person and not a loyalty to a political party, but a loyalty to the oath. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what we need in our General Assembly here, so we could save Tennessee from becoming what New York and California have become: just people chasing the money, representatives with dollar signs for their political party instead of actual Republicans. So, Will, again, it's been a pleasure, and can't wait to get this out to the public, and hope to hear from you again in the future.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Will.
All right. Take care.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on this week's show. If you missed the main chat, rewind and listen up, because we just had a great discussion with Will Bolton, the true conservative warrior gunning to unseat the establishment puppet in Tennessee's House District 23. Folks, we dove straight into the heart of the Nashville swamp, exposing how incumbents like Mark Cochran have sold out East Tennessee with their yes man votes. Will laid it out crystal clear. Cochran's backing of those unconstitutional school vouchers is nothing but a cash grab that stars our rural public schools while funneling taxpayer dollars to unaccountable cronies. We hammered home the hypocrisy on abortion, how Cochran's support for sneaky exceptions weakens pro-life protections, which betrays the unborn and our East Tennessee Christian values. But Will, he's 100% no compromise pro-life, drawing from his faith and family roots to slam the door on any government meddling. On the Second Amendment, Will's all in for unrestricted constitutional carry. And as I said in the opening, McMinn County is part of the district he is running to represent, and that county's own Battle of Athens serves as a reminder that we, the people, won't tolerate infringements. We discussed bloated budgets, corporate welfare like stadium deals, and the explosion of the Tennessee budget under Governor Bill Lee's establishment rule. Will is pledging ruthless cuts, an independent inspector general to root out fraud, sort of like Doge behavior, for efficient, limited government. As a fellow vet, I connected with Will's military service in the Navy and the Tennessee Air National Guard, plus his Secret Service days guarding against corruption up close. Now, as McMinn County constable and substitute teacher, he's on the front lines, fighting for veterans with the Defend McCard to keep our troops home unless Congress declares war, and boost local farming to shield us from federal overreach. This man's no career politician. He's pledging self-term limits, regular town halls, and polling constituents to ensure real representation, not PAC-driven lies. So, Patriots, if you're fired up to drain the swamp, head straight to Will Bolton's official campaign website. That's at boltonfortn.com, and you can learn more about him there, or you can volunteer or get in touch with him. You can also follow him on Facebook at Will Bolton for State Representative to get the latest updates, videos, and ways to join the fight. Share it wide, because this primary is our chance to crush the good old boys and restore liberty in Tennessee. And as I said, this is a wrap for today, but the battle always rages on. Subscribe, give the episode a comment or a thumbs up, and join the Liberty Leadership and Lies community, because exposing the lies is how we reclaim our freedoms. So this week's wisdom from God's word comes to us from the book of Proverbs, chapter 21, verse 3. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Righteousness and justice can be restored to Nashville only if us fellow Tennesseans, we can participate in our system of self-governance. We have to overcome the abysmal voting rate in our state's primary elections and support actual conservatives that are seeking office. So not only do you need to vote, you also need to bring as many people as possible to the voting booth during the primaries. Thanks for leaning in today, folks. Please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And you can join me on X at my handles of @LarryForTN12 or @LiesLiberty. As always, you can also visit the website libertyleadershipandlies.com for more. And let's keep standing in the arena for liberty, leadership, and truth. God bless you, God bless Tennessee, and God bless America. Until next week, Reveille, it's time to wake up.